Okay, so we've got everything sorted out now, and I'm gonna walk through uh, the chain of command here and talk about it a bit, in case you've got to know how it is, like you won't play the game. So I've got Shaposhnikov in charge of Stavka, mainly just for historicity, I guess, if that's even a word. He was one of the major military planners of the Soviet Union until he died in 1943. He was an old man, but he supposedly had the ability to quote various books on warfare from memory, and he was a pretty solid military planner. And his benefit is his skill number increases the chance of a combat reinforcement, that is if you attack with too many troops, ever so slightly, and also he reduces stacking penalties by 1% for each skill level. So although it sounds like a really important job, it doesn't affect combat all that much. Then we've got the Third Army Group, which is this entire army around Finland. And for every skill level of this guy, he increases supply efficiency. I've also given him, he has Logistics Wizard, which is a trait that makes him better at logistics. That only affects every division, brigade, etc. by 12%, but 12% spread out over all these things is pretty big. Also over all the naval and air units in the area. I've got 2 special divisions, and those are both commanded by commandos, and those are Marines. I also have the 2 fleets, the Baltic and the Arctic, and several bomber and fighter wings under command. And then you've got Army, and those guys, their skill level determines, gives a bonus to the organization of the troops under them. So high skill generals here are important, as well as the army group, also important for your economy and also your ability to fight protracted battles. And their traits affect everyone under their command by 25%. Then you've got the corps under them. They increase combat reinforcement, not the theater command like I previously stated, which isn't so important overall. But the nice thing about corps commanders are 50% of their traits. So like Tabulkin here, he gives offensive bonuses to 50% to every unit under his command. So pretty handy overall. And then you have the division itself, and that commander influences the division directly. They get 100% of his traits, and his skill level gives them all sorts of benefits. They also level up much more quickly than anybody else because they see direct combat. So it's a good idea to get generals maybe who are low in skill but have highly desirable traits and put them where they're going to see the most combat so that they level up the quickest, which is what I've done. I need engineers, I need logistics wizards, and I need offense and defense and fortress busters, and commandos. So I've thrown them all in, and I've also rearranged my economy to reinforce as quickly as possible and get all of my troops in order. So we're just going to move them into position here on the Finnish border for the eventual war with Finland. We finished combat medicine, which gives more points for officers. As you can see, our officer ratio is very low at this time, which is not good. I'm also finally bleeding out more supplies than I'm getting or making because I canceled all those trade deals. And that's just going to be how it is. But I've got so many of them, it's not particularly important to me right now. If I was really up on it, I wouldn't reinforce any of this stuff. But again, I don't know if Hitler's going to attack from Poland, so I need all this stuff here to be as ready as possible. I've got the little groups here I made in the first or second video. Those are for like crack reinforcements, just to get everything. You can see how they're angled at the border with Poland so that I can fill any holes that start, and we'll have to pull away from Finland. That'll be the important bit. And so our entire armored column will come through down this way towards Warsaw as quickly as possible. And now we're into July. Things are going to heat up, but I need to get these armies as reinforced as possible without mobilizing, because I don't want anybody to get really freaked out. And we'll have some inefficiencies here and there. Airborne infantry, hooray. So we'll queue a few of those guys up. After this war, I'm going to have to sort out what exactly it is I want to have done with my massive production queue here. And since we're still in 39, and we've got plenty of research going down every which way, my goal is to get off my research down to 16. That's how I like to do it. It feels like a good solid number. Mechanized offensive. Okay, so that's all done. And that'll get us to 16. And that'll probably be where I hold it. My 3-year draft is going to give me a massive bonus to officer recruitment, which is why I have done this. Because I want to get it to 90 before the war starts. 90 is not optimal, but I don't really have a choice, because my army expands so rapidly there over that small period that I'm going to end up with inefficiencies. Elastic defense. So I've got a lot of generals in there with some pretty interesting stories, but I might use them to kill time. Over this time, they're still negotiating with Britain, and one of the funnier stories is Voroshilov, who was head of the army at the time. He was a Civil War hero, cavalryman, and friend of Stalin's, and he made a pretty insulting joke because the top guy from the British negotiations had an Order of the Bath, which is a military award in Britain that's fairly prestigious. And he joked about, what's the reward for the bath, and why is there an award made for a guy who took a bath? And they just kept making fun of him. So that it shows the difficulties that they were having overall, and some of the misunderstandings they had. But Britain pretty much took the Soviet Union to be a third-rate military power, as well as there being the issue of not actually being able to attack Germany, except for most likely by sea, and that there wasn't a great deal of confidence that that would actually work. So there was a high probability that France would basically be left out to dry. Which is kind of funny, because that's what they ended up doing to Poland. Alright, so here we go. In August 23rd, so it fired early. Hitler and Stalin signed a non-aggression pact. So basically what happened is the news was pretty well known that the negotiations weren't going very well, and Ribbentrop in Germany contacted the Soviets through the German ambassador Schulenburg and talked about maybe making a pact. Ribbentrop flew to Russia, to Soviet Union, and wrote the treaty on the way there, on the flight there. And the treaty basically said that Germany and the Soviet Union were having a non-aggression pact. They would not fight each other unless one of them directly attacked the other. And so that ruled out any treaty with France or Britain. And furthermore, a secret portion of the pact was signed, which determined that various parts of the world would be divided up between them. Finland was considered under the influence of Russia. Germany was to have nothing to do with that. Sweden was not mentioned, but more or less given to Germany. The Soviet Union was given influence over all 3 Baltic states, with the exception of parts of Lithuania, because the Germans wanted Memel. And then divisions of Poland were planned up based on rivers. And the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, I should also point out, doesn't mention the abolition of the Polish state. It just mentions where the influence will be. Hitler had already decided to invade Poland. The plan was already there. But what the Soviets would do and what would become of Poland afterwards was up in the air, really. And also parts of Romania were given as influence areas for the Soviet Union. So, and that's basically how they set everything up. And you get to pick, propose an unholy alliance, which was something they talked about from time to time, of actually turning it into an alliance, but nobody ever did that. No deals with the enemies of the workers, or a most excellent proposition. And that's pretty much the best way to do this. So there we go. And now we've signed the pact. They actually saw, the British and French delegations in Moscow actually saw Ribbentrop walking away and gave him really odd looks as he flew back to Germany with his treaty in hand. The pact itself is pretty controversial, because in the Cold War era it was spun mainly that the Soviets did it and thus allowed Hitler to start the war. But from a Soviet perspective, they had no choice. It looked like no one was going to make any agreements. In Mein Kampf and in numerous statements, Hitler had always said that he wanted to destroy the Soviet Union, and they knew that he would come for them someday. So they just had to take whatever agreement they could get. So September the 1st. Germany has decided Danzig or war. Ribbentrop has asked the Poles for the return of Danzig. On March 31st, British and French guaranteed the borders of Poland. And that was a while ago, by the way. Stalin, blah, blah, blah. And the pact is signed. Nobody knew about that. The secret portions, anyways. And the war is about to start. Ethiopia is mobilizing as a puppet of Italy, and only Germany went to war with Poland. So Slovakia will start to fight against Poland, but like Hungary, other Axis members, Italy didn't have anything to do with it. And the Allies actually tried to deal with Italy to get them to switch sides, like they did in World War I. Italy was supposed to be with Germany in World War I and switched sides before the war actually started. Netherlands, Germany has decided to blitzkrieg while others prepare for a rerun of the last war. Germany will show the new face of warfare. And Canada has joined the Allies. So, for a quick rundown of how all this stuff is going, I've got two friends in the whole wide world, Tanatuva and Mongolia. And I have Xinjiang and Communist China aligning towards me. And that's basically it. Whereas the Allies now have UK, France, Iraq, Oman, Yemen, all British puppets, Bhutan, Nepal, Poland, South Africa, and Canada, all traditional British colonies except France. And Poland. The Axis has got Italy, Hungary, Slovakia, and all the Japanese states, and Ethiopia. So, pretty dire situation here. Let's see. I'm apparently being influenced by Sweden and Switzerland. Well, what can you do? Alright, so that's the start of the war. I have the ability to declare war now on Finland. It looks like it's a pretty good time to do that. So, we're going to go ahead, and while the world is distracted in Poland, we're going to invade Finland. In real life, the Soviets didn't invade Finland until later. Their purpose for doing so was they said that Leningrad was under threat and they wanted these lands here on this isthmus, the Karelian isthmus, and they wanted to have that as a buffer for Leningrad in case Germany were to come through Finland. They also wanted to rent this naval base in Hanko, and the war went really poorly for the Soviet Union, in part because of the officer purges, and also in part because their military had massively expanded, and even without the purges, they wouldn't have had enough NCOs and sort of the little things that make an army actually work at its job. And also the Soviet Union entered into Poland. There was never a declaration of war, and Poland didn't declare war on the Soviet Union either, and they entered Poland and met German forces in Brest-Litovsk. The Germans had basically told the Soviets that Poland had collapsed, and if the Soviets didn't enter into Poland and occupy their parts, the military situation was going to force Germany to take possession of all of Poland. And Stalin did not want that because he wanted to put as much distance as possible between Moscow and wherever the German border was. Because, again, the Soviets had no illusion that at some point Germany would attack them. So they entered into Poland. They claimed that the Polish government had ceased to exist, and for all intents and purposes it had. So they just entered in and occupied. The other thing they used as justification is a lot of these bits of Poland belong to, ethnically, Ukraine and Belarus. And so there were Ukrainian and Belarusians living as Poles at the time. Nikita Khrushchev, who would eventually become leader of the Soviet Union, his parents actually were Poles during this time. So we are going to fight our war now.